With Coretek Services. Today we're here with Jim Hunter, Chief Information Security Officer. He's going to be talking about security operations centers, what you should do and why you should do it. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Paula, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, today's topic, Security Operations Center. I think it's one in the security realm that comes up quite a bit, especially in a lot of the conversations that we have with our clients, just in terms of defining really what is a security operations center, or a SOC for short, and why you need one, and really when you go down that path of identifying the need, you have a couple of branches to follow in terms of, do you build one or do you outsource it? And in today's conversation, we want to explore all those avenues, and then kind of give you some feedback from my side, and some past experiences I've had in developing my own RFPs and going out to service with solutions like this, and then more importantly, explaining why Coretek has formed this very tight partnership with Arctic Wolf, and why we feel like they're the leader in this segment. So moving forward, the topics that we'll discuss, as I mentioned, we'll go through that definition of what is a SOC, and then I'll explore that path. The outsourcing tips, I just have some that I put in there, just again because of some past RFPs. I've gone through the formal process, I've gone through the informal processes, but things I've realized over the years of just what you should be looking for if you decide to outsource. And then I'll introduce Arctic Wolf and Coretek's managed services, because those two really work together to give you, the clients, really a full concierge and managed solution in this space. And then we'll save some time at the end for questions and wrap up. So moving into the first one of what is a SOC, or a Security Operations Center, and just going by the book, 24/7, 365 centralized facility where you get that combination of people, processes, and tools working together to continuously monitor an environment, and specifically around cybersecurity threats, events, and incidents. The counter to this that many of you may have already today is a NOC, a Network Operations Center, and that one would definitely be focused more on the infrastructure within your company, whether it's the network connections themselves, or the servers and various infrastructure that's delivering your applications to your users, or your services to your customers. And both typically 24/7, 365 have their tools, but more importantly, where they divide is the people and the processes. And that's what we'll get into a little bit more in the discussion, and because we do find a lot of clients try to cover both with the same staff, and some are successful, but the majority are not, really for that reason, because you're trying to have a single set of people perform both functions at the same time. And first we can step back through sort of that evolution of security, and how we've gotten to where we are today. And you go all the way back into the early 90s. Everything was about creating that defense in depth with a DMZ, and placing firewalls and multiple firewalls, getting a signature-based antivirus solution in place, and that was almost the extent of security back then. Once you got through really those two, maybe in your firewall you had some additional rules and things to filter traffic, but there really wasn't a whole lot, especially on advanced sets of features that we have today around AI and other things. And then the next gen tools, really when they started to shift away from signature based antivirus in the 2000s to more of the early stages of, I'll consider, the AI and machine learning, to watch for attacks and things that maybe don't mean a signature, but could mean a behavior. And really that's where the tools evolved to, was it's not enough to say, okay, this machine has this particular virus or this particular piece of malware. It's, hey, why is this machine that's in an end user location reaching out to 30 other end user machines laterally? And that's where those tools evolved to there. And then we got into security platforms more, where it was the market shift of the big players, the Symantec's, the McAfee's, the Palos, really creating that ecosystem of tools where, and Cisco as well, where you could have an endpoint agent working in tandem with, say, a firewall or an IPS, IDS type device, and them feeding each other information as a platform around. And then finally, evolving into what we've seen in the last few years is security operations overall. Taking all of those tools, platforms, processes, things that we've evolved over the years, and putting them under one umbrella, one centralized facility, and offering those as a service now to clients. And so, it really leads you to a decision point, and that is, around people and tools and processes. Do you build or do you outsource? And I think in a lot of companies, especially within IT, if you have a very thin IT team or you don't have anyone dedicated in security, I think the build path is a much harder path to follow. I know people like to kind of hang their hats on a lot of automation and alerting through that regard, but just our experience has shown that it does fall apart rather quickly. I mean, you're asking people that first question, you're asking people to really be online, on call, 24/7, 365, and that includes nights and weekends. You're going to need a minimum of probably 3 to maybe 5 people if you're going to build this SOC. If you're going to rely on people doing it as sort of their 12th hat, maybe it's the IT team and you're going to rely on someone to watch for alerts coming through, I think you'll very quickly find that things will get missed because people sleep. People aren't necessarily glued to their phones, or in a lot of cases, you'll see over alerting occurring, and then the behavior really then becomes, well, I'm going to write rules in my email system to make sure those alerts don't continue to inundate my inbox. So there's that people issue throughout all this. If you can get past it, or if you can, you're afforded the opportunity to hire, then you have to think about what level people do you need to hire. Level 1 people versus architects. I think you're going to need all of them at some point. The architects being really pointed at the tools and the solutions that you bring in, versus the level 1 people being the ones that are answering the initial alerts, doing that triage and investigation. And then how are you going to attract these hires as a company? I think the security landscape is very, very competitive. The needs are over the millions now in terms of qualified security people across the United States alone. When you factor in the government and other state entities and the needs of them, it's a highly, highly competitive environment. So a lot of people will and a lot of clients will take resources from their operational teams in IT, whether it's the field support teams or some of the server people who have an interest in security, and sort of branch them into this area and train them, and then quickly find out a year to 2 years later that now those people have that experience and they have that training, they're being courted by all these other security firms to go work for them. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, in that area to hire. So it is something to consider. And then how do you, when you do that initial training, but how do you retain your talent and continue to train them? Those are all, I think, the people issues that you got to consider when you're going down that build path. And then the other things to look at on the tool side, what are you going to bring as an organization? You're going to go open source or commercial? There's some listed on the left, some of the major players in all those spaces. And then you got to go through the cost of, what are those licenses going to cost? Are they data ingested costs? So you have some solutions that will charge literally by the amount of data you're pumping at a SIM, and SIMs function better with the more signals they're given. So you can quickly ramp up your costs if you're not careful in that area. And then number of devices as well. So you need to really put together that full cost picture along with the maintenance and upkeep. And then if there's any hardware you have to buy, some of these are provided through a SaaS offering with maybe an appliance or a sensor on premise to feed back those signals. And then if your organization starts to migrate from on-premise to cloud, are the solutions that you've chosen and the tools you've chosen, will they extend over to the cloud? And then if they do, is there additional licensing costs there or setup costs that you have to go through? And then can you continue to use that same rule set? Is there an out-of-the-box one? Each of the cloud environments is going to have a much different set of needs for rules. And is that something you're going to have to create yourself as part of that? And then obviously we talked about the training issues up front, how you're going to train them initially and ongoing. And then really, who has that master plan in mind for the SOC? Is that your architect? Is that the person managing the group? Where's all that SME knowledge? And the counter to that, obviously, if you make that decision to outsource, there's some questions there to ask as well. It's not necessarily a blind leap of faith either. So, the questions that I find the easiest to ask the outsource companies is, how do you conduct training for your people? How do you keep them sharp? And then how many level 1, 2, and 3 analysts do you have on staff overall and then per shift? And then is that a dedicated team of people for you, or is this pooled? And then that last question is one I always like to ask is what's their turnover rate? Is this going to be one of those constant training, constant headache type situations where you just get a few analysts used to your environment and now they're leaving and there's more to come in? Tools as well, for me, getting the vendor to supply and manage the tool set is key. A lot of them will say, oh, we'll work with what you have. I found that that's a very dangerous proposition. While it sounds great that, hey, we can utilize all our investments in our tools, I found it gives the SOC vendors the ability to, when they miss an alert, to say, yeah, your tool didn't pick it up, or yeah, it was the way your tool was configured. I much prefer the method of you're providing the service, you provide the tool, you configure and manage it, and that way if things are missed, it all comes back to that outsource vendor as well. They know how to tune the tools. Again, there's no blame game if alerts are missed, and then the maintenance for you is eliminated. And then some things to put in to think about putting into the contract are some no notice tests. I've done this in a few of my contracts. It's worked out really well. I can test their services whenever I feel like it. I don't have to give them notice I'm going to conduct this test. There's a number of ways to do security tests like that. It could be as simple as simulating some sort of denial of service or port scan to see if they pick that up, to something a little bit more in depth. But the whole point there is to test their effectiveness at monitoring and whether they're catching the alerts or not, and then escalating them appropriately. And then put some performance penalties in place, including early termination. If they fail 2 consecutive tests, then put it into the terms of the contract that the client, then have the ability to break the contract itself for non-performance and find someone else. And so with all this, Coretek, as I mentioned, has partnered with Arctic Wolf. Really, we feel like they're the best in the industry in terms of this managed detect and response, but also with managed risk and managed cloud monitoring. And we'll get into the whys here pretty quickly as to why we formed that partnership and how Coretek's managed services can get bolted onto it to create really an end-to-end solution for the clients in the security operations space. So, Arctic Wolf solutions, they're built on top of the same platform and approach, and their solutions will, they'll leverage existing technology to gain a broad visibility across endpoint, network, and cloud. But their key differentiators are that their solutions are vendor neutral. They can work with multiple clouds. They can work with multiple infrastructure components that you'd have on premise. You don't need to rip and replace or get a certain type of infrastructure in place. They centralize all of their data in a cloud native security platform. So compliance is also a foundation of what they're doing. They have a couple of monitoring centers, one in the US and one in Canada. So it definitely, if you're in the healthcare space and your data can't leave the US, they have an advantage there as well. And then, just overall, their ability to catch the data streams via their sensors and agents. They can easily walk through an event from the point it hits a sensor down to which endpoints it hits, and they're able to help with the remediation side as well. It's not just passing along an alert to you. they have the ability to actually take active action through those agents as well to help you at least control the incident when it comes up. And one of the big things with them is their platform allows for unlimited data ingestion as well. They don't charge necessarily by the data volume or events per second, so your pricing definitely stays very predictable versus some of the other solutions I've seen where as you scale it goes up. And then the biggest advantage of all from my opinion for them is the fact that all their security solutions are delivered by a concierge security team. So, by that, they're going to pair you, the client, up with a team of security people that not only monitor your data, but they'll learn the organization. They'll learn your unique requirements. They'll really go through a lot of that initial discovery with you and become an extension of your organization in that sense. So you're not constantly talking to new people that have never heard of you before. These are people that on a day-to-day and month-by-month basis will be working for you and with you. And then the solutions that they offer, as I mentioned, across the box, they're all across the top in the orange boxes. The managed detection and response, the MDR, that's probably what everyone would consider the traditional SOC services. But they also offer managed risk, and that is that continuous vulnerability assessing within the environments and pointing out the highest risks to the organization as a result of that continuous scanning. And then they can monitor the cloud in various platforms as well, which will become important as organizations make that cloud journey. And so, going down the managed detection and response side, again, it's concierge service. So, I think this, in my mind, is the leading benefit to Arctic Wolf, and the fact that they provide that experience to their customers. And it really cuts down on one of the key factors with any SOC service, and that is you tend to get over alerted. Especially in the first 6 months of a service where they don't know you, and this is a great guard against that. Nothing I find is worse than when you're getting over alerted, even from a SOC or even an automated tool. And so they have the ability to very quickly learn your environment and stay on top of it to reduce that. One of the things they do point out in their new customers, and this is really within what they define as the first 90 days of becoming a customer, is they find 70% of those customers have existing threats already in their environment. Once they turn on their tools and get them installed, both on the endpoints and the sensors in the environment, they're able to quickly see that there are already existing issues, and quite honestly, they're prepared for that. They expect it, so it's not necessarily a surprise when they do discover that. But when they do discover it, they're going to really identify what it is, where it is, not just send you the same alert that they're seeing, but they're actually going to put some investigation behind it as well to determine the exact threat, to give you some steps to follow in terms of your response as well, and not just drop something on your doorstep. And if you have a partner like Coretek involved as well, really that's where our managed services team would pick up that response and then take care of mitigating the incident in the recovery phases. As far as SLAs, with their 24/7 coverage, all the critical incidents are identified within 5 minutes that you're alerted, and in 30 minutes or less, no matter what time of day it is, you'll get a response from them. So very tight SLAs as far as their services go. And then they do some active threat hunting, and that's a big key. Is they're not just sitting there waiting for the alerts to come through, they're actually going out and proactively looking for threat activity. And because they've got multiple clients in there, you're all benefiting from these threat hunts, in the sense that if they find something in another client, that set of heuristics and how they found it get applied to all the clients. So then you get the benefit of that as well. And moving over to their managed risk. So this is really what I consider continuous vulnerability assessment. I think in the highest sense, you're going to do an internal scan and vulnerability assessment, an external scan and vulnerability assessment, but most people do that on a timed basis. They're actually taking it one step further and doing it on a continuous basis, and adding in that third point where they're doing a host-based vulnerability assessment as well. So when they install these agents on the endpoints, they're able actually to look at potential software that's been installed. It's not the 1,000 copies of Adobe that are installed that they're worried about. It's the 1 or 2 copies of something that's installed on a person's machine that may introduce a Java runtime issue or some other vulnerability that they can watch for. So I think that in itself is a huge advantage from other SOCs that I've seen. And then they are also looking at logins and other user behaviors to watch for that risk of account takeover. They do scan in the wild to see if any of your accounts have been compromised and found out in the wild as well. And those risks will all be brought back to you as well. And then the third component to that is, the cloud. Everyone has or is making that migration to either cloud first, cloud best within their IT organization. And out of the box, Arctic Wolf has that support, and they've got it across all the major cloud vendors. The Azure, AWS, Google cloud vendors, but also the SaaS providers. So if you go out to a Salesforce, if you go out to a Dropbox or a box for your file storage, they've already got APIs and ways to monitor your SaaS applications for any behavior as well. So it's part of their service. It's part of the support. It's not something you have to necessarily add on. As you expand and go into different cloud tenants or different applications, they'll wire up those various components as well. And then, the blurb at the bottom right over there, that 47% of the incidents they detect include a cloud component. So, up at the top, they're talking about that unsecured S3 bucket or some other unauthorized cloud deployment. Very often, that's what we see in our clients. Especially as you have some clients that have that pay-as-you-go mentality, where somebody on a dev team opens up their own subscription in one of these cloud platforms and starts developing without involving the rest of the IT team or the security team, and thus you end up with situations like that. And their ability to monitor all of those is key to that. And this is just a quick high-level overview of their sensors and how they ingest various logs and events, distill them down to alerts. And then ultimately, if an alert is confirmed, it becomes an incident. And if something does go to a high enough level where they need to do a forensic exam on it, they will go through and research and gather all that information to do an analysis. And then as part of that, they will show what remediation steps you need. And then that active threat hunting that we talked about and vulnerability analysis. So where does Coretek fit into this partnership? So as you can see, everything that Arctic Wolf offers on the left, Coretek also helps manage the remediation efforts and activities 24/7 as well for our clients. So as these alerts get confirmed into incidents and need remediation, and they hand out those set of steps, Coretek can then step in for our clients and actually perform the remediation efforts for you, so that your staff can continue to do other things. Again, a lot of our clients, this is an area that they just don't have the staff to support, or they just don't want to anymore, and they'd rather use the resources for projects or other work. And then we also have our own set of security offerings as well that we bring into our clients, and that is in Office 365 security, Azure security, that device patching, backup in DR, and then any Palo next-gen firewalls as well when you get out to the cloud. And again, what I touched on, this is really what gives us that end-to-end coverage, and that as a ticket comes out of the Arctic Wolf monitoring service, we can then respond to that ticket for you, confirm the alert with them, and then go through that response playbook that we set up with you, the client. We can remove the device, we can scan and clean it, we can rebuild it as well, and we'll have all of those available as part of our playbooks that we define with you, the client, at the time we develop the service. And then patching as well. I think in today's day and age, even though patches are issued on a certain timely basis, we all know I think the expected time to apply has been continuously shrinking as we're going along. You know, the attackers don't necessarily wait for timed intervals to attack. If they can find a vulnerability out there, they're going to exploit it rather quickly, especially on the public-facing devices. And then just to wrap up, I think you know, the biggest takeaways for this, you know, if you're new to the SOC area and SOC space, you know, start with just defining your needs. Is this going to be monitoring for your on-premise devices or the cloud? Are you going to be going to the cloud in the future, and you need to consider those? Is this something that you want in a service for 24/7, or are you going to handle the core hours and then look for after-hours support from a particular vendor? And then is this just going to be managed detection only, or are you going to bring in that continuous assessment, that risk set of services as well? And then once you define those, you can make that decision of whether you're going to build it yourself and do that cost analysis and look through people, or you're going to outsource. And in that case, you know, really look at who you're going to outsource with and what tools they're going to bring to that. And with that, I'll wrap this Tech Tuesday up and see if there's any questions from anyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate your point of view on it. I do have a couple questions in the chat window here, so if you might indulge us for a moment. This one's kind of interesting. So as a CISO, what do you look for when you outsource security services?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a couple of things. I mean, it's first I want to see how big their operation is. How many centers do they have? Kind of go through those people issues as well. I think you know, have a good understanding of how many people per staff they're going to be running, what their turnover rates are. Again, what monitoring centers and locations they have. If I've got, you know, HIPAA or governmental data that I work with in my business, I have to consider the location of where they're going to be monitoring from. But yeah, and how long they've been in business, and you should be able to get those statistics, you know, pretty easily if they don't have them at hand or can't get them for you, you know, within a day or so of your call. I'd definitely be very concerned.
Awesome, thank you. And this one kind of goes hand in hand with that. How do you, security changes every single day. How do you keep it current? How do you know you're working with the right partner? What's the governance look like?
Yeah, that again, you know, great question to ask even up front to see with your outsourcers. I know with Arctic Wolf in particular, they're very upfront and transparent about that. They will show any client or prospective client what processes they go through to train their staff to make sure that not only are they initially trained, but how they keep them trained. You know, they go through a sort of an ingress process where new people are brought on and really work in a shadowed environment with others. And then as they get more tenure under their belt, then they're put into different roles from that level 1 on up. But yeah, definitely ask those questions of any other SOC providers that you're looking for to see, you know, what is their training plans? How do they keep up with new technologies as well?
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Jim. Really appreciate you sharing information on security as a service. If anyone should like to reach out to Jim, please feel free. His information was included in the PowerPoint, and that will be attached to the email that you'll receive after the end of this event. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.